Hey, it's JMV. Thanks for listening to my podcast brought to you by Connecticut Water. Connecticut has a revolutionary leak detection system. You got to learn about this and how to save $1,500. ConnecticutIndy.com for all the details.
That fought a team that did withstand the loss of its star. Game 2 is coming up tomorrow night on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline from The Athletic. He is our friend Stephen Holder with us. All right, when the schedule comes out tomorrow, how many primetime games do you expect for the Colts, Stephen?
Good question. I'd say the bar is probably 3, I'm thinking. I think they became pretty interesting toward the end of last season, and it really does boil down to stars and quarterbacks just generally. And
right.
So they have a couple of those. They certainly have a quarterback. So I think they're interesting enough. One of the higher scoring teams in the league last year. And, the networks, they want fireworks. They want fireworks, offense, and or stars. So the Colts check some of those boxes. So I think 3 is reasonable.
Well, you look at that schedule, and I know it always changes. I mean, it never stays the same as far as what you think is tough and what you think is easy. But just eyeballing their opponents right now, how much of an upgrade schedule-wise is it from what we saw a year ago, Stephen?
It feels tougher. Yeah, it does. We'll be wrong about this, I'm sure. but as we see here today, yeah, it does feel a little tougher. I mean, I don't ever truly buy the idea of an easy schedule, but sometimes things break your way, and injuries may go in your favor in terms of, who's missing on the other teams and that kind of thing, So, you do get some breaks sometimes, but I also, as you already pointed out, I mean, I never cease to be amazed from year to year just how unpredictable the fates of NFL teams are. Look, I get that parity is built in and it's intended to be that way, and the schedules are stacked and all that. So, I understand all those things. Nevertheless, it's still shocking to me sometimes just the disparity between expectations and where teams actually finish. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me. So who the hell knows? But it does feel like a little bit of an upgrade in terms of difficulty. But I also feel like the Colts are better prepared, right? So, that 1-5 start last year, that came up yesterday. Talking to Darius Leonard, for example, he's like, that can't happen again. And I mean, I have no inkling that could even happen. Could you even envision a scenario where the Colts start 1-5 in 2019? I think they're infinitely more prepared to handle a tougher schedule, and they know who they are, they know what they're capable of, and I think they're going to be fine.
Stephen Holder of The Athletic, he joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. The AFC South, might we be witnessing the best season that we have seen top to bottom in that division? We're way far away from getting anything going here, but what do you think about 2019's version of that division?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be upgraded. There's no question about that. Look, I think Nick Foles, outside of the Philadelphia incubator, maybe isn't the same guy, but definitely I give Jacksonville a puncher's chance now in a lot of games with him, pushing the buttons in Jacksonville. I mean, really, if they can get their defense on track, right? And then they got some head cases there, so they got some work to do. But if they could get their defense on track and get guys to stay in line, generally, looking at you, Jalen Ramsey, if they can do that, a lot of times it's boiled down to, will the quarterback or will he not screw it up? And Blake Bortles too often screwed it up. So really, Nick Foles is your classic don't screw it up guy. He can also make plays too, but he certainly can play clean football, and that's what you can. Well, we've got a great defense. So enough about Jacksonville. I like Jacksonville's chances to at least be interesting and competitive. If not for frankly running out of gas there in Week 17. I mean, they were the inferior team, no question, compared to the Colts that night. But look, they were right there with an opportunity to strike and get in the play. And then Houston obviously had a great season last season. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really competitive division. And frankly, just the quarterback situations alone, I think, make it interesting can win any given Sunday. And that right there is a game changer. So I think the Colts are not in a situation where they can ever really have a down day in their division anymore. Those days are over. And if you have a bad day in this division, you're going to lose. And that's their reality. And they're going to have to cope with that here for the foreseeable future.
I agree with you. And Stephen Holder joins us, too. I think this is going to be the best we have seen. And I forgot the best that's ever been was like, I think 08, if memory serves, somewhere in that neighborhood. But
right.
I think everybody is going to be upgraded, maybe one more significantly than others. The thing about Jacksonville is this to me, Stephen. I couldn't tell a year ago. We've known that the quarterback position has been really not the strong point, has been awful. It has been a detriment to them most of the time. But it was just the personality. I mean, it was the alpha dogs and the difference in personalities in that locker room. I thought more that led them down the path to how bad that season was, even more so most of the time than Bortles play on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that can be a problem sometimes where they were really an interesting kind of social experiment, right, in Jacksonville last year because you had so much talent, but you had these full personalities in many cases, even on offense, in the Fournette, like what's his deal, right? And I think, look, having personality is not a bad thing. I don't have a problem with that. But I think the team this year who could have a similar fate potentially, right, or who's going to have a similar challenge, let me put it that way. Their challenge is Cleveland. They got all these stars in that locker room, and I think they're in the same situation because I hear a lot more humility coming out there. But it is going to be interesting. And Cleveland also hasn't really had success yet, whereas Jacksonville has been to the conference championship. But it's an interesting experiment to see how all those personalities coexist and who is more interested in getting theirs and getting commercials and being a social media star, all those things, right? And I think that is a challenge. It's a challenge for the leaders. It's a challenge for the coaching. It's a huge challenge, and I think Jacksonville failed that challenge miserably last year. And then to top it off, you had a quarterback who you couldn't count on. So it was just a dreadful situation. But I think it's going to be different this year. And if they can get those guys to refocus, they'll have a shot.
So Stephen Holder of The Athletic, he's on the Eddie Moore Automotive Group hotline. So give me a crosshairs position you think that Chris Ballard and company will address at the end of round number one.
Mm-hmm. So I'd say it's likely defense. I'm not sold on the idea of them going receiver. I'm just not sold on it. If the top receivers in the draft all and we'll see, right? But outside of that, I think it's either defensive line and I think it can be either end or tackle depending on what's left, or you're talking secondary more than likely corner more so than safety. So those are my positions. I think defensive line 1A, 1B would be corner. That's how I see it, and I think those are the value positions. Okay, those are the value positions. Like you don't draft necessarily based totally upon best player available or totally upon need, right? There is no such thing. Nobody does that unless you absolutely need a quarterback, and then that's where all bets are off. But most people, I think most teams look at the totality of the situation, and they rank those players.
I tell you what, hey, hold on 1 second. Hey, Tony, see if we can get it better. His line keeps cutting out, and it's not getting any better. I was going to give it about 30 seconds, and it wasn't going to get any better on me right there. See if he can maybe stand in one position on his right foot with an old school ding dong wrapper foil on top of it or something. Because this, yeah, I don't know what's going on with it, but it's cutting in and out. This sounds better right now. Just let me know when it is all good. We'll hit the question again. I got to hit the running back position, too.
He's by the window.
All right, Stephen Holder of The Athletic rejoins us. I hope this is a good thing. Now,
My house is a dead spot.
Stand on one foot and maybe, hang out the window and see what happens here. We missed a little bit of that analysis about the end of round number one. Were you talking safety? Was that direction you were going?
No. So what I was saying was I think 1A for me is defensive line. And, you can go back and forth between end or interior, depending on, how the board falls. But defensive line generally. And then I think that's 1A. And then for me, 1B would be cornerback. So I think, and here's why. I think those are the value positions where they have needs. Nobody drafts totally based upon need or totally based on best player available. It's both, okay? Because what they're doing right now, the Colts and every other team, is they're grinding on this tape right now, looking at all these guys, and then they rank them. And the rankings for your individual team are based upon, quite honestly, where the value is. And where the value is for one team is maybe different for another team because needs come into play. So I think when you go back to it and it all gets done in the end and they start looking at where they have players ranked, they're going to rank those positions high, I believe, if the talent's there. And it boils down to, as I said, those positions being positions where there is some talent, extensive talent, and then there's some need there too. So, and frankly, those are premium positions. So that all affects how they rank those guys.
Stephen Holder's with us. They brought in Jay Ajayi about a month ago, and most recently brought in Spencer Ware, the former Chiefs running back. Is there a premium in their mind before the start of the season or before camp to get somebody of a veteran, been there, done that presence in that backfield?
I think it's the other way around. I think they're going to reassess after the draft and then perhaps make a move then. I think that's the more likely scenario. Right now, continue the dialogue with players, but nobody's making any moves right now. I mean, although I did see the Patriots apparently just before you called me apparently sign Demaryius Thomas, but hey, Demaryius Thomas is not necessarily the game changer he used to be. So that's kind of a extraneous move in my mind right now. But generally speaking, for the most part, you're not going to see a lot of moves right now. It's going to be teams preparing, I think, to strike after the draft if need be. And your needs may be different after the draft because you may address that need. You may find a running back you really like and you pick him, right? And then you don't need Spencer Ware. So we'll just see. I just think really it's about being prepared and knowing what the landscape is. And part of that is talking to guys and being ready to make a decision on them if and when the time comes.
It's Stephen Holder with us. You know what's funny about Justin Houston? I was on in a Kansas City station with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and one thing that we rarely bring up around here, it's all about trying to get somebody to do something consistently that hasn't been done consistently since Robert Mathis in his huge season years ago, and that is getting after and putting pressure on the quarterback. All right, that's the expectation for Justin Houston. But the other thing that he does so well that Kansas City folks will explain is setting that edge, which has historically around here, Stephen, been something that has been talked about and not necessarily game after game done by a Colts player.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to tell you something. That is 1,000% correct. And I went back and watched quite a bit of film on Justin Houston from last year. I think we might have talked about this a couple weeks ago. I put together a little film review on it. And if you go on my Twitter, I think it's pinned to the top of my account still. And so in there, what I learned, because look, I'm not an expert on Justin Houston, right? But what I learned through doing that was a lot of times I watch certain plays and I see him, against the run, and he doesn't make the play, right? Like he doesn't make the play. But the one thing I noticed was that running back had to bounce it back inside because he had nowhere to go. He couldn't get around the edge. And why? Because Justin Houston was sitting there like a roadblock. And so it oftentimes, it wasn't the plays he made, but it was plays that he impacted despite not actually making the tackle. And that's what a good edge setter does. And the one thing that I learned through that exercise was my basically the majority of my knowledge about Justin Houston, which has just been, very surface level, has always been, okay, he's a good pass rusher. And that was kind of the extent of it. No one, like as you said, no one ever talked about him beyond that. But the real elite, I think, edge players in this game, they do it all. And Justin Houston does it all. There's no question about it. I was very surprised to learn that, and pleasantly surprised. I think they're going to get a really complete player in Justin Houston, and I think people will see that when they start watching him play.
Do you think that, and obviously price tag is going to be different, but let's just, the players themselves, would you have rather seen Chris Ballard get a D Ford or a Justin Houston? Was there a difference? And don't let monetary value play a role in this, but just as a player, which player would you have rather had?
I think the feedback I got from inside the Colts building on D Ford was that they were a little more worried about him making the 3-4 to 4-3 transition than apparently they were about Justin Houston. Now, I can't get into the specifics as to why. I mean, it wasn't, they didn't put it up on a chalkboard for me, but that was the sentiment that I got, was that D Ford, there was more of a projection with D Ford. Could he play in this 4-3? Would it work? How effective would he be? That seemed to be more of a projection for the Colts than it did with Justin Houston. And when I see Justin Houston play the run, I kind of see why, I think. Now D Ford might be the more effective pass rusher maybe at this particular point of Justin Houston's career. We could argue that. I think he probably is. But certainly Justin Houston, it appears, has the more well-rounded game. And you got to do it all. Look, the rushing defense in Indianapolis has been, I thought last year it was very good. It was very good. Surprisingly good. And you can't give anything back on that. They got to continue to build on that, and that's really going to be the basis of their defense. You got to shut the run down so that you get those third and longs, and that's how you can play this soft cover 2 and just play the ball, right? It's all about setting up scenarios in those situations that work in this defense. The way you do that is setting up third and long. So they're going to be able to do that if they keep stopping the run. And I think Justin Houston is a big part of that. And maybe D Ford, as I said, maybe wasn't as obvious, would not have been as obviously ideal for that situation.
I will say this. Justin Houston's done it over the years and done that. And he's still more noted, I think, than most fans that aren't Kansas City fans as being a quarterback guy. But he's done the overall game where D Ford just had, a terrific season this past year. And that's really what everybody's going on right now as far as the comparison.
You're right. There's not the longevity there. I mean, look, he's a much younger player, so that's always going to be a bonus for him. But you're right. The track record's not the same. There's no question about that. I think you're right. And look, Justin Houston is 30. I think just turned 30. So you're talking about a guy who's on the backside of his career. But I think his game, the good thing about Justin Houston's game is there's a lot of power in his game. It's not all speed. And I think that's the kind of guy who can continue to be effective even as he ages. Now, of course, there's going to be some decline, right? I mean, that's just to be expected. This game is about about physical ability, right? So there will be some decline. But guys who are not just completely reliant on their speed, they can play at a higher level at a later age. And I think that describes Justin Houston. You're going to see a guy who he has some speed and he has some quickness, but that is not necessarily the basis of his game and the basis for his success. So I think he can still be effective.
Stephen Holder is on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline here. Before I let you go, wide receiver-wise, is this going to be something addressed within the draft that you would expect maybe midway through, or is this something that they're still looking at, some floating around available veterans to try to add to the depth?
I think you have to add a receiver in the draft. I really feel strongly about that. And here's the thing. I mean, look, could they go out there and play today and be effective if they had to play tomorrow? Yeah, they could. Certainly getting Funchess on board allows you to do that. You get Chester Rogers back, et cetera. However, it's about 2020 that's where you have a problem. They don't have anything in the pipeline. They got T.Y. Hilton and nobody. And that's the issue. What do you have under contract for 2020? In Deion Kane, obviously, who we still have to see actually do it. Everyone's excited about Deion Kane, but Deion Kane doesn't have any resume to speak of. So I think if you're looking long term, what's going to happen is if you don't address wide receiver this year, you're going to turn around next year and you're going to be scrambling a little bit. And I just feel like Chris Ballard's too smart to let that happen. Now, if the guys aren't there, you can't force that pick, right? But given the opportunity, and if the right guy's on the board at some point, second round, third round, fourth round, you got to do it, I believe. I just feel very strongly that they got to add a receiver.
Nobody veteran-wise?
I'm not saying nobody, but I think that they don't feel let's put it this way. They don't feel an urgency to do that. I'm not saying they won't do it. I'm saying I don't think they feel as much urgency because if they did, I think Dontrell Inman would have already been signed because they could have him if they want him. Okay, he's out there, right? I mean, they could do it, and he hasn't been signed. And I've gotten a little bit of a lukewarm reaction, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I feel that they're a little lukewarm about the idea of re-signing him right now, not because Dontrell didn't help them. I think it's also a matter of there being some duplication between Dontrell Inman and Devin Funchess. And you just talk about these guys being both possession-type receivers, both bigger receivers. There's a little bit of them canceling each other out, I think, is part of Inman's issue right now with the Colts. So they'll have to work through that. I think we'll know on the other side of the draft whether Inman's going to be back. I would think we'll know pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure that they probably assessed the market value and haven't picked up a lot of thought that there's a lot of interest in him right now. But I would say this, in comparing him to Funchess, he didn't drop. And Funchess has got a history of drops. Dontrell Inman this past year didn't. In fact, he solidified a wide receiving core that had a drop epidemic going on. So I would probably look at it more, if I were them, than just from a lukewarm angle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. There's no question. I mean, Dontrell Inman, adding him was a game changer last year. I think it probably says more about the current performance of their wide receivers at the time than it does Dontrell Inman. But at the same time, the guy was clutch, and I can't take that away from him. So I agree with you. I don't disagree whatsoever. But we'll see. I mean, I do think that you're going to probably have some drops at Funchess, but I also think the counter argument to that is, who also dropped a bunch of balls last year? Eric Ebron. That's right. So,
but he made up for it though in other ways. So, he did it in a way you can live with it. Yeah.
Eric Ebron dropped as many balls last year as he did every other year. He was the same freaking guy. He had a better quarterback and a better coach. That's kind of what it was.
In closing, I'm glad you brought him up. Is there any way that Eric Ebron lives up to the level and the bar that he set offensively, even with those drops in 2019 for the Colts?
Good luck. I mean, 14 touchdowns. I mean, come on, right? So, look, I think that Devin Funchess may eat into his targets in the red zone. That's going to be one of his problems, potentially. I say problem, like I don't mean it as a real problem, but I mean it could impact him, right? I mean, Devin Funchess, Frank Reich has talked about this. One of his greatest strengths is the ability to throw it to him in the red zone and have him, be that sort of basketball post-up guy. That's what he is, and that's where he can really be effective. And you don't have to even really get creative. You're talking about fades and those kinds of things that are coming, but can you defend it against a guy who's legit 6'4", right? So I think that to your question about Eric Ebron, can he duplicate that? I mean, the odds are against it, especially because the other thing to mention here is Jack Doyle's coming back. Yeah. Jack Doyle played 6 games last year. Jack Doyle is a 100-catch guy 2 years ago. Okay, so, yeah, I don't think so. There's no way. If he does, God bless him, but I can't imagine it.
Stephen Holder, The Athletic. What's your latest they can find on the website if they sign up and check out your work?
A couple things. We've got yesterday, I think the relationship, I talked about Frank Reich just now and how Eric Ebron benefited from having a better coach. and quarterback. Well, you know who else is going to benefit is Andrew Luck. And I really feel like, Andrew Luck going into year 2 with Frank Reich. I wrote about this yesterday. It was posted last night. One of the things that I think is going to continue to happen is Andrew Luck's going to get better. He has never spent more than 2 years in any given offensive system. So he's going into year 2 with Frank Reich. Andrew Luck's best season was 2014. That was the second year with Pep Hamilton. So he was able to build on the previous year. I think there's some significance to that. If they can stick together for a long time, I'm telling you, I think this duo here has got a shot to really be something.
All right, check out his work at The Athletic. It's Stephen Holder covering the Colts and then some on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Hey, thanks for hanging in there with the window stuff. I appreciate it.
I think my house is a dead spot. This doesn't happen anywhere else.
I get it. Mine is too. I live way the hell out though, so that's kind of my problem there. So, hey, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
See you.
Stephen Holder on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Quick break. J. Michael going to join us. Is he solidified?
Yeah, he's good to go in Boston.
From Boston. What time is he going to join us?
5:30.
5:30, J. Michael, which means we may have a couple of minutes for anything goes. Randy Moore wrote this. JMV, did you say Mackenzie with your sister? There's no way you guys are related. No doubt. No doubt. No, I said she's my sister at Andy Moore Toyota because she does all the television ads and I do the radio ads. So.
Yes, my brother from another mother.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But yes, we are not brother and sister. So take that meanness back in that email right there. We're going to have her do a promo or two for us coming up in a couple of minutes. Jay Michael's going to join us live from Boston in front of game number 2 tomorrow night between the Celtics and the Pacers. He joins us and your calls next.
Your hands were made for greatness. Mighty hands for painting.